Hi everyone, I'm going to be speaking to you today about the first half of June and the new moon that's coming up in Gemini on the 15th. Now, we are really entering an extraordinary few months, particularly I think the months of June, July and August are going to be remarkable, and particularly the month of July quite historic, and we may not feel that going through it, but in looking back, I think we will very clearly identify it as such. We're already in a 1 year according to numerology, and it's the year of the fire horse, and the energy is really going to pick up. Now, there is a wonderful amount of high consciousness, high frequency awakening energy coming in. If any of you saw the conversation I had with David Clements last week, I'll put the link for that below, because he described that in a lot of detail, what we're going to be experiencing, particularly over the next 2 months, that we can really optimize as an incredible opportunity to weave with this energy, which is extremely rare. And it really will help us to create new perspectives as we enter the last few months of the year from September onwards, which has a different energy, I think it's fair to say. But remember, as we move through this, what's your focus? I talk about this a lot. What's your focus? Because coming off the back of the full moon in Sagittarius on the 31st of May, we may already have shifted our perspective, our belief systems, our whole worldview, actually. And this new moon in Gemini is really going to take that a step further, but we have to continually remember where we're putting our attention, where we're putting our focus, because in the quantum realm, your focus is food. What are you feeding as your future? So, because we really are weaving the tapestry of tomorrow in every moment. So what are you choosing to create with all of this Gemini energy? What are you choosing to create moment by moment? And this will help us to be more conscious in our thinking, because we are, as we move through this year, learning to master our energy. And the better we master our energy, the better we master our reality individually, actually, and that obviously feeds into the collective as well. So, and I'd suggest that as you start moving around your world day to day, in the past, I think we've seen through the lens of thinking, the information age. The internet has been amazing for that. Google searches, TikTok, all the social media platforms have very, very much been mind-based. But we're now moving into a different era where we're going to be, I think, much better served if we feel through energy rather than think, rather than analyzing by words or information. We really start to feel, we feel other people's energy. How does that sit with us? Is that really coherent and wonderful, and you want to spend more time with that person or that group of people, or does something feel not quite right? It's that kind of navigation as we go through our world. Now, June is going to be fast. It's going to be busy. It's a lot of Gemini energy here. And at the 3D level, I think we're going to have lots of twists and turns. And remember, when I'm talking about any sign, I'm not talking about it as a sun sign, somebody with the sun in Gemini. I'm talking about it just as an energy expression. And so Gemini at the lower expression can get very scattered and distracted because it's mutable air. It's extremely creative, extremely flexible and adaptable, and has many, many benefits. But the lower expression of it can be quite scattered and distracted. And I think to add to that, in this early part of the month, the ruler of Gemini is Mercury. And Mercury is going to be out of bounds, which means beyond its normal 23 degrees, 23.5 degrees of latitude north or south of the ecliptic. And so when planets are out of bounds, for instance, if you're born with an out of bounds planet, say you're born with out of bounds Mars, it has a quite extreme or slightly out of control aspect to it. But you may be a great athlete who can break records. You know, you go beyond the norm. So there's a sense of going beyond, expressing in a more extreme way. And because there's already quite a lot of, yes, versatility, but also volatility and distraction with all the Gemini energy, its ruler, Mercury, being out of bounds until the 14th of the month, so this first half of the month running straight into that new moon on the 15th, will exaggerate that. And what it tends to do is the planets that are already in Gemini, Uranus, Sedna, Ceres, which you'll see in a moment, the Sun and then the Moon at the new moon, are going to have that slightly exaggerated feel as well. Now, this can be, again, brilliant for new thinking, new perspectives, but it can encourage, you know, that more scattered or that slightly extreme, jazzed up feeling for us. So we will also have at this time until the 7th of the month, Venus out of bounds as well. And Venus rules the two signs, as you will know, of Taurus and Libra. The only planet in those signs at the moment in this first half of June is Mars in Taurus. And so although Mars in Taurus is normally, it brings stability and tenacity and perseverance and persistence, Venus being out of bounds for the first week of June could exaggerate the kind of Martian aspect of Mars being in that Venus-ruled sign. So just be aware of these. So this first part of June may seem quiet superficially, but there's an awful lot going on to make the energies a little more pepped up, let's say. Now, we also, and you'll see the chart in a little while, I'll share it with you, but we have the planet Ceres, which is the goddess of the harvests and grains and agriculture, on the 1st of June, conjunct Sedna. And so that suggests there could be some issue around harvests and grains because of flooding or extreme sea conditions, or on the 4th it's conjunct to Uranus, and that can suggest disruptions with harvests and grains and food supplies in general. There's a disruptor, and we're very well aware of the disruptions in fertilizer at the moment, and of course with Chiron moving into Taurus on the 19th of June, and I'll put the link for the video I made below on the update on the big picture, which was really quite focused on Chiron in that video. There could be issues around, you know, agriculture, food production, fertilizer, etc. And that's very clear already. But it can also bring about innovations, new discoveries, innovations in the way we grow food and the type of food we eat, etc. And the more we keep our consciousness high, the more that kind of creativity is going to come through. On the 4th also of the month, we have Neptune square to Mercury. Now, if you're working on a creative project, again, this is potentially very creative energy through June. If you're working on a creative project, this is Neptune at 4 degrees of Aries squaring Mercury at 4 degrees of Cancer. It has that wonderful imaginative side, and you'll particularly feel that if you have any planets or angles between 3 and 5 degrees of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. But it can also suggest some kind of deception or things not being as they seem and secrets coming to light around that time. There's also another big opportunity around the new moon in Gemini. There's been a big opportunity with the full moon in Sagittarius, all about truth and revelation. This is going to keep on rolling. Secrets are going to keep coming out in waves. And this could be Gemini connected with young people or children in some way. Gemini is connected to young people and children. So really use your discernment as we go through these times about what's true, what's not. Check in with your feeling rather than your mind. And then we come to something really lovely. It's one of the most beautiful aspects in June, which is a conjunction between Venus and Jupiter on the 9th of June. And this is going to happen at 25 degrees 46 minutes of Cancer. So this is the lesser benefic Venus coming together with the greater benefic Jupiter. So if you have any planets between kind of, I'd say 24 and 27 degrees, particularly of Cancer, but also of Scorpio and Pisces, the other water signs, you're going to feel this in some way. Now, it could be just a greater appreciation of beauty. Again, it can be very creative artistically. It can be you have a lovely romantic time, you have a lovely social time. It can bring in some, particularly if it's in your 6th house or your 10th house, some recognition or success or abundance or even honors coming to you, some prize of some way, recognition in that way. And if you don't know what I'm talking about in terms of the house areas, you can download a free birth chart from my website. Go to this link below. You can get a 2-part video series that you can watch forever in terms of where these aspects fall in your chart that I talk about in the updates and what it means for you. It's not a personalized birth chart analysis. These are teaching videos, and you can watch them as many times as you like for as long as you like. So that's going to be very helpful to set you off on your astrological journey. But this is very beautiful. It's visible in the sky right now. And for instance, in the UK, I sit out and watch this every night if we have a clear sky. Because round about 9:30 in the evening, which is going to be for most of Western Europe 10:30, it's a couple of hours after sunset, you can very clearly see, if you look to the west, Venus, very easy to see. She almost looks like a Merkaba. She's so sparkly in the sky right now. And just to her left is Jupiter with a sort of reddish color, and you will gradually, day by day, up until the 9th of June, see them come together in the sky. So, you know, literally watching the astronomy, and obviously adjust that for your own time zones elsewhere. It can also bring popularity. You know, it's very, very social, very beautiful. So that is one of the nicest aspects, I think, in June. Now, also, and I made a separate video on this, which I'll put below, which is Uranus squaring the nodes. Now, we're really going to feel this all of June, but it's exact on the 12th. Uranus square the nodal axis. And the nodal axis is to do with our collective path of soul's growth, where we are moving to as a collective. And when Uranus squares that, that's quite a big deal, because it kind of can throw a curved ball to some extent into where we think we're going. But it might be a very helpful curved ball, because it will challenge the normal trajectory. And you'll see where this sits in the chart when I put it up in a moment. This can bring in more galactic connection, whether that's in your dreams or your meditations, or literally starting to see galactic beings in a clearer way. We're all going to experience this at different levels. It can bring up a lot of choices that have to be made, and choices that have to be made quickly. Be very cognizant, because Uranus is square the south node in Virgo, right at the beginning of Virgo, and that's to do with old daily repetitive habits that just become so familiar to us. And so beware of falling back to old familiar habits just because it's easy and we don't have to think about it very much. But the North Node is still in Pisces right now, still conjunct the beautiful fixed star of Fomalhaut, the connected to Archangel Gabriel, and very much linked to the spiritual teacher and mentor. And this has a much more mystical and magical, and again, creative quality. So that's the other end of the nodal axis, which is meant to be where we are focused on. So which are you going to choose? You're going to choose the easy, familiar option that doesn't create much soul's growth, or are you going to choose the new ground, as it were, of really moving towards the mystical and the magical? This square of Uranus to the nodal axis can also bring in digital developments that are quite sudden, that we have to make quick decisions on. Remember, Gemini is all about choices and decisions. And these new digital developments may or may not be welcome. You choose your discernment. New technology could be coming in, but I think a very big sense of more seismic activity at this time, but also rebellion and revolution. Uranus is the planet of rebellion and revolution. Now, we're going to feel this all this year, for the rest of the year. Issues of freedom, issues of civil rights coming up strongly. And that's partly because, as I've spoken about many times before, for the 10 years from 2025 to 2035, we are in a period which Rosie Finn, the astrologer, talked about so eloquently. This is the year where the decade where the power really moves to the people, and there is much more rebellion and revolution. And that doesn't have to be violent on the streets, but it can be as simple as an emotional and energetic decoupling from the system and the choices we make. It's just a very clear statement of sovereignty, and no, I'm not going to do that. Enough. And I think we're going to see a lot of that, because Uranus is not only square to the nodal axis, and again, I've put much more information in that video that I'll link below, but also because Uranus is currently tightly trine to Pluto, and in July, it's going to become exactly trine to Pluto. Now, this is the real blossoming of the seed point, the conjunction between Uranus and Pluto that was exact in 1965 and 1966. Now, this was a remarkable period. I mean, even if you didn't live through, and people talk about the 60s, you probably instantly think of the hippies and communes and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all of that rich music and art and culture. And, you know, the 1960s and the 1967, we had the Summer of Love. It was all about peace and love and anti-war protests against Vietnam War at the time. There was a lot of demand for greater equality in society. Civil rights movement was very strong. Women's lib, you know, the Black Power movement, the gay liberation movement. There was a lot of demand for greater equality for people who felt a little on the periphery in society. Now, that's coming up strongly again this year. We have multiple factors suggesting that. That trine between Uranus and Pluto, the square of Uranus to the nodal axis in terms of where we're going, greater equality. We have Eris conjunct Chiron very strongly right now. We've had it for some time, and it's very strong indeed, and it's going to be amplified in late June with a square from Jupiter as well, because Jupiter, when it comes conjunct to Venus on the 9th, isn't just conjunct Jupiter, it is also square to Eris. That square to Eris becomes exact on the 25th of June. But there's an amplification of that Eris energy, of the goddess of chaos and discord. the goddess who demands greater equality and every voice to be heard, nobody to be excluded. So there's a real, and with Jupiter, I mean, Jupiter is really starting to move fast now. Jupiter enters Leo, we'll be talking about that much more in the next update, enters Leo on the 30th of June. And boy, is it moving quickly, because Jupiter stays in a sign for 12 months. By the end of this year, it's already moved from 0 to 27 of Leo. It's moved right through the whole sign pretty much, apart from the last 3 degrees, in 6 months. That's really remarkable. And then it starts to backtrack, which means that through this year, the second half of this year, it will aspect every single planet in your chart. And I'll be talking a lot about that again in updates to come. But there's this sense of firehorse energy, amplification, rebellion, revolution, people saying no more often, because there's so much truth coming to light that this is bringing in a lot more, I think, new perspectives and radical readjustment in how we see our reality, and rethinking of how we used to see the world. And all of a sudden, the phrase that keeps coming to my mind is the scales fell from their eyes. That's the quality of what we're moving into. I mean, July is going to be just a crescendo of many, many things. But that theme is most certainly going to be one of them. So, let me share the chart with you, because this is the chart for the new moon in Gemini on the 15th. Okay, so this chart is set for England, where I live. Please ignore the clock face and the houses. You'll just have to readjust those for your own time zone. We're just looking at where the planets fall and their aspects to each other. So the new moon, sun and moon always together in Gemini here, 2403 of Gemini. So here we have a lot of energy in Gemini. We can see we have, I haven't put Sedna in here, but she's at 1 degree of Gemini, Uranus, Ceres, goddess of grains and harvests, sun, moon, and we also still have a lot of Aries energy as well. And both of these signs are linked to very fast moving energy. Only one planet in Earth, which is Mars and Taurus, but as I've mentioned earlier, because Venus rules this, it could amplify, while she's out of bounds in the first week, that nature of Mars. So with all this jazzed up mental energy, it can be a feeling of overwhelm, and you're hopping from one social media platform, one lot of information, to another, a lot of zigzags, a lot of contradictory information. We can get really, really jazzed up in the head. So really commit to a daily practice, in fact, several times a day if you can, of the things I've spoken about many times, which is your stillness meetings. Try and find complete stillness where you empty your mind as an antidote to all of this mental energy. Because Gemini can express as lower mind. Social media, to-do lists, shopping, coming and going, that kind of lower mind activity. Try and find silence in your days, even if you have to use headphones that block out all the noise. Just try and empty your mind to get to that state of dropping into bliss. Check out my yogic belly breath explanation on the meditation page of my website, pamgregory.com. Be in nature, bare feet on the earth. Have a breathwork practice. Candle gaze, meditate, whatever your choice. All of these are free. All of these are free, and everyone can do them. But whatever your choice, really do try and make that a daily practice and several times a day, because there's going to be so much coming at us that will serve you very well. Now, Uranus conjunct Sedna, as I say, is at 1 degree here, so they're tightly conjunct. And as I've mentioned before, that is really through the next 12 months going to bring up some amazing discoveries from ancient times, deep seas and oceans, beings who live in the deep seas. These may be beautiful sea creatures, and don't forget creatures like the octopus, incredibly intelligent. All the sea creatures are incredibly intelligent, have much to teach us. And could it be that they are galactic creatures? They're certainly leading our ascension. And Joan Ocean has done some beautiful work with the dolphins talking about that. I think Sedna is not only linked to the deep seas, I think she's linked to the inner earth, the ancient galactic beings who live in inner earth. And Lee Harris in his recent channeling in our conversation, David Clements in his recent conversation with me, and Martha Alter Hines, my good friend, all of them are either channeling or speaking about the inner earth beings being potentially one of our first contacts with any sense of galactic beings. We are also galactic beings, as we know. And so I think communication with sea creatures is going to become more common. And I think all of this is going to change our perception of who we are as humans. And even bringing up more people who speak light language or ancient languages, or some kind of language which we haven't even discovered yet, that is sea creature language to do with sound. I mean, we're aware of those beautiful sounds that the dolphins make that can really help to, autistic people can communicate with dolphins and whales, I understand, really quite easily. What's that language that potentially more of us can access? So see where this new moon in Gemini falls in your chart. 24 degrees of Gemini. Don't forget to set a new seed, a new intention for wherever this is falling, because this potentially can bring in new ways of thinking, new perspectives. Everything begins with a thought. And that really is true. Even though we're trying to get out of our minds, everything begins with a thought. And words, when vocalized, are then the next step. These are all ruled by Gemini. Words, information, thoughts. Words are the next step in manifestation. They're the bridge to the reality that you're building. And what you focus on expands. So watch your words, whether they're verbalized or whether they're written, all still ruled by Gemini. Gemini is particularly deft at writing, by the way. In order to become more conscious with your thinking, and it's something I mentioned a few months ago, try and catch any negative thinking, negative words, negative thoughts by having a delete key. And I mentioned my delete key is fun and freedom. And if I don't tend to have many negative words that I speak out loud, but I'm aware, because this makes you think more consciously, of any negative thoughts that crop up. So have a delete key. Is it just fun? Is it just freedom? Is it, you choose your delete key, whatever it is, but it instantly has to be something that raises your frequency. Mine is fun and freedom, as I say, or makes you more aware to catch those thoughts and feelings and words. But it also helps you to shift from your mind to your feeling. So all of this is very helpful to have a delete key. So I mentioned when I was talking about Uranus conjunct Ceres that there could be disruptions in, well, we're seeing it already in, food supplies. We'll see potentially that coming from Chiron moving into Taurus on the 19th of June. But a theme, an aspect which emphasizes that, is the new moon 24th Gemini is exactly square to a dwarf planet called Taharon Hayawako. Now, Taharon Hayawako in mythology is a creator farmer god, and the principal theme of that myth is that he has to make sure there are enough seeds for the harvest to provide food for the following year. He has to make sure there are enough seeds for the harvest to provide food for the following year. So, this is clearly a very important theme, which is why I think more of us might be growing our own food or having a sprouter on your windowsill. Even if you're in a small apartment, you can do that. And just having different ways. I think there are going to be different foods going forwards that are highly nutritious. These could be from the deep seas. But I think very concentrated forms of nutrition are going to come forwards that we may not have known before. I mean, apparently, many galactic races eat very little. They can either survive on sun gazing and only do that at home if you know what you're doing, or very small quantities of high nutrient dense food. And I think that could be what we're moving towards as we shift more towards the light body. Also, just want to mention here, as I said, Chiron is moving into Taurus for 3 months on the 19th of June, but Chiron here is right at the end, the anaretic degree of Aries, and that's going to highlight where we've been a victim and help us understand more objectively where we've been a victim. And we are therefore going to move with much more consciousness into changing that as Chiron moves into Taurus and we start to build more a much more solid sense of self-worth and a different sense of values. And again, that was linked to my big picture update on the big picture video, which I'll put below. And both Uranus, both Chiron at this anaretic degree of Aries and Sedna's whole myth, whole story, they're both about victimhood, and in Sedna's case, extreme trauma. And Sedna's story is how extreme trauma moved from disempowerment to very full empowerment when she surrendered the old identity, the old her in every sense, the old being of Sedna, when she had her fingers chopped off and they transmuted into beautiful sea creatures, and she became a goddess. She metamorphosized, if that's a verb, into her empowerment. And when I was speaking to Alan Clay recently about Sedna, and I'll put the link for that conversation below, because that was fascinating too, he talked about Sedna not just as an example of metamorphosis, but as an example of transcendence, where Sedna is describing a shift to a much higher state of being, surrendering from the trauma that we have all lived through. My goodness, we've lived through some trauma, not only in this lifetime, but in many lifetimes, and stepping into our transcendence and our soul's path of destiny with that North Node. So we are letting go of old identities, of ways of remaining safe in old consciousness. And however valuable and safe they felt, it is more important for us now that we move into peace, calm, stillness, transcendence, and radiant presence. So it's very interesting that we have two different levels of things happening here. On one level, we've got a lot of mind, we've got a lot of fast-moving, jazzed-up energy, a lot of mental energy, a lot of distractions, scatteredness, look here, look there, zigzags, is it true, is it not? And that's all external. This is really about our consciousness and how we're focusing our consciousness. What part of our consciousness we're emphasizing, whether it's that external reference. But if we turn inwards via our breath work, via our feet on the ground, via our candle gazing, our yogic baby belly breath, whatever you choose as your default practice, it becomes much simpler as we turn inwards. We become one-pointed much more easily, and we can start to feel that sense of peace, calm, stillness, centeredness, heart coherence, very important, heart coherence. And even if we can just feel that for a few minutes a day, the more you do it, the more it starts to alter your set point of frequency to something way better than we've lived to date. And it also gives us an inner strength, because many people are living with this greater sense, despite what's happening at the horrors happening in the outside world. They feel that they can serve the collective best if they remain in peace and calm and stillness and even bliss. Because that brings an inner strength with it. It's divine feminine energy for sure, but it brings an inner strength with it of the ability to say, no, enough. And it's very interesting. So, there are two different levels of consciousness happening here very clearly. And I want to highlight, I haven't talked about this dwarf planet for a little while, but the new moon is tightly conjunct a dwarf planet called Algira at 21 of Gemini. And I love Algira. Algira is the creator god of the Arente people in Australia, has a 294-year orbit. And this Algira dwarf planet, the myth, is very much connected to dream time. That dream time is more real than our 3D reality. That creation, visioning, imagining, making our visions originally in dream time, and then making them manifest in the world of matter, is how Algira sees the world. That's her mythology, or his mythology, creator god. So they believe, the Arente people believe, there are two different levels of reality. There's our kind of Geminian, everyday, linear, objective reality, and there's our spiritual dream time from which we create, that, as I say, is more real than our everyday reality. So what Algira represents is our portal to dream time, our portal to dream time. And this new moon, giving us the potential for new ways of thinking, etc., is the entry point to that. I think that's really beautiful and incredibly powerful. So understand the potency of these times. I'm going to stop sharing here and recognize each of us actually operates at two levels. We have to exist on our day-to-day level. We've got to-do lists, we've got shopping, we've got appointments, etc., etc. We all exist at that level. But try and make that dream time, that higher dimension, which is malleable and morphing and loving and coherent and to do with transcendence. Try and make that level of your reality a bigger part of your day and the most important part of your day. And know that that is where you create from. This is Kwawa's, another dwarf planet. That's her mythology too, or his mythology. I think it's androgynous, actually, Kwawa. That we don't create from the chaos and the scattered, distracted mind. We create from our imagining, our visioning, our sense of heart coherence, our sense of transcendence and bliss. And really do try and drop into that. And every sign has its esoteric meaning as well. And Alice Bailey was a very prominent theosophist, and she became very involved in all kinds of esoteric thought, including esoteric philosophy and astrology. And she believed that Gemini plays a crucial role in bringing love and wisdom into the world via communication and connection. Gemini, communication and connection. The ruler, Mercury, she saw as the messenger of the gods, connecting the divine and the human. And so it's like a harmonizing of duality that we have at the esoteric level with Gemini. But really do find these simple opportunities of, dropping into the heart with your breath, candle gazing, bare feet on the ground. These are absolutely elementary for us all. Check out my meditation page. Check out the Yogic Baby Belly Breath. Join the free 15-minute meditation that's at 7 p.m. every night. I think thousands of people across the world are doing this now. There are 2 free meditations you can use on there if you prefer to be guided or just join energetically. Because it is so important for us to start to master our energy, master our frequency. Because we can't feel bliss and transcendence if our mind is running the show. We can't feel bliss, transcendence, coherence, or radiant presence if the mind is running the show. So I think this new moon in Gemini is incredibly potent. And it's leading us into a phenomenally powerful few months of astrology. It's remarkable that we are all alive at this time. I'd suggest you keep a dream journal. I'd suggest you keep an automatic writing, perhaps, journal. And even if you don't do those 2 things, I'd suggest you keep a journal, because we are going to truly look back on these times as historic. And you'll want to look back and plan to be proud, and be proud of the part you played in this remarkable transformation for humanity that we are living through. And I don't normally speak in a hyperbolic way, but I do believe that these are huge times. God bless. I really hope that's been helpful for you. And be back very soon with something different again. God bless. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.